up to verse 23, chapter 25, verse 23. V'asisa shulchan atzei shitim, you shall make a table made out of acacia wood. Amasai marco, it's the table should be 2 amot long. Ve'amarach bo, 1 amma wide. Ve'ama v'chetzi kamato, 1.5 amos tall. So the Gemara says, Rashi says, Gova Raglav im Ove HaShulchan. Its height with its feet and the thickness of the table. Right, meaning to say that that counting the legs. Meaning like you measure it with its sneakers. You shall cover the table with a crown. So the ark had a crown, and now the table has a crown. You should make a golden crown around it. Rashi says, Zer Zahav, what's the crown about? Siman Leketer Malchus. It's a symbol of the crown of Torah. Shashulchan Shem Osher Gedua. The table expresses wealth and greatness. Moshe Omrim Shulchan Melachim, a table of kings. So up until now, we've seen the ark. The ark represents the crown of Torah. It has a crown. It represents the crown of Torah. The table represents the crown of kingship and wealth and greatness. The table represents praying for support and sustenance. So that's what they're saying. That's what Rashi is saying. So by the way, everything in the Mishkan corresponds to something in our own home. So our table corresponds to the table in the Mishkan. Our Torah, our books correspond to the ark. Our Shabbat candles, our Hanukkah candles correspond to the menorah. So those are some of the most obvious things. Okay, and then you shall make for the table miskeret. Miskeret is a frame. Miskeret, you shall make a frame around it. Tofach saviv. It's 1 tefach all around. Nasita zer zahav. You shall make a golden crown. Miskarto saviv. A golden crown for its framework around it. Rashi says as follows: what's a frame? Kitargumo, gedampa. What's gedampa? An enclosure. V'nechaku chachmei Yisrael b'davar. The sages argued about this. Some say it was around the shulchan. It was lamalaita. It was around the shulchan. It was around the table. Kamo leviz bezin shebesfat shulchan sarim, like the border along the edge of a nobleman's tables. Okay, we're gonna see that. So that it was around like that, like Rashi has there's an illustration here, and some say some say it was on the bottom from the feet, so it's not 100% clear where this frame was.
You know what? Even Ezra says to that it's on the bottom. He says, on top, this is clear. Everyone knows how tables are made. I love it.
Yeah. V'daf hashulchan shochev. V'arba ruchot hashulchan on the 4 sides. V'daf hashulchan shochev oto miskeret. And the slabs of the table lie on that frame. So it could either be on the top or on below it. It could either be above it or below it. Okay, listen. I don't know what to tell you, but Rashi was telling us basically how the noblemen in French used to have their tables. So that's very interesting. You shall make a golden crown for the frame. Who's there? It's the same crown as above. And here we're being told that it was on the frame. That's like picture C and D. Nice. Okay. zav. You shall make 4 golden rings. V'natata tatabaot. You shall place the rings on the 4 corners asher arba raglav, that are on the 4 legs. Verse 27. Lumata miskeret, and then opposite the rings, tiena tabaot. Opposite the frame shall be the rings. Uvadim, and they will be for housings for the poles. That's how you carry the table. Rashi tells us, biraglayim tikuot keneged rashi miskeret, inserted into the table's legs, corresponding to the end of the frame. This goes in accordance with the second interpretation of Rashi, that the frame was underneath and not on top. Okay. Okay. Levadim, utan tabot, those rings will be yubatim lachnis ben abadim. Those rings will be holders for the poles. Levadim means holders. Letzorach batim levadim, for the purpose of housings for the poles. Okay, verse 28. You shall make the poles made out of acacia wood. You shall cover them with gold. And you shall use them to carry the table. Verse 28. And the table shall be carried to them. Lashon nif'al. The shulchan will be carried by them. Okay. And you shall make for the table vasita karotav v'chapotav. Does anybody know? Pause. Do you know what went on the table? The bread, the lechem hapanim. The bread. It was always there. Vasita karotav v'chapotav. You shall make dishes and spoons. Uksotav and umaniakiotav, and its tubes and supports. Asher yisachba and zahav tahor otam, and it should be covered with gold. You shall make them. It should be covered with pure gold. One of these things, Rashi says, Vasita karotav v'kapotav. You shall make dishes and spoons. Karotav ze'atfus. Shaya asoi kitfus alechem. This was the mold that they used to put the bread in. They used to make, the reason it was called, one of the theories why it was called lechem hapanim is because it was the mold that the bread was made in looked a little bit like a face. So they used to make the bread in a mold. So pour the bread into a mold, and that's how it came out, like a cake pan almost. Okay. That's what Rashi says here. And the bread was made from a box that was breached on both sides. It had like a base below. And the base was folded over like walls. That's why it's called the lechem hapanim, typically translated as showbread, but here the Rashi, it's translated here as the bread of surfaces. That there's surfaces looking both way. But towards the sides of the temple from either direction. And he placed the length of the bread across the width of the shulchan. And the walls of the bread would be standing upright directly above the edge of the shulchan. That's the lechem hapanim.
So why did they need so many bread?
What they would do is the bread, because they were praying for sustenance. So it symbolized that we're praying for sustenance. And then every Shabbat, they would give the bread to the Kohanim who served that week in the temple.
Also 12 of them, right?
There were 12 loaves of bread. Right, to symbolize the tribes. and a golden mold and a iron mold were made for each bread. Bishal barzel nefa, it was baked in the iron one. Ukashemotzio minatanura, when they would take it out from the oven on Friday, no snow bishal zahav adol machar b'Shabbos. He would put into the gold ones until the following day on Shabbos. Shemesadro al shulchan, and then he would put it on the table. Voto defus karoi ka'ara, and this mold was called a dish. And they would bake it in the iron and then place it into the gold mold.
You couldn't make it in gold, no.
And then what they would do is they would place that onto the table on Saturday, on Shabbat, and they would eat the bread that was baked the week before on Shabbat.
It was still fresh.
Still fresh. But they would eat basically bread on its 9th day. Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday. Oh, it's 9th day. So they would eat it on its 9th day. V'kapotav b'zikin shenotnim be'elavona. So they also had spoons. What would they do with these spoons? They would place frankincense into these spoons. Shtayim hayu v'shnei kumtzei lavona. 2 of them for 2 handfuls of frankincense. Shenosnin al shtei marachot. They would put 2 handfuls of frankincense in these spoons, which were on the table, on the stacks of bread, one on each side. The loaves were arranged in 2 stacks of 6 loaves. Upon each stack, there was a spoon of frankincense. And Rashi here is following Rabbi Yehuda's opinion that the breads covered the entire tabletop, and the frankincense was placed atop the stacks. And the frankincense was placed on top of the stacks. So that's the opinion. So
Jerry has a question.
according to Rabbi Meir, there was a 2 tefach space between the stacks, and the spoons were placed there. And the Rashi says, as it says, "V'nasata al ma'arechas lefona zakah." You shall place upon the stacks the pure frankincense. Yeah, Jerry, what's your question?
40 years of traveling in the desert. Where did they get the wheat for all of those Shabbatot with 12 breads?
That's no problem.
That desert did not grow wheat.
No, but they had presumably, first of all, you could buy wheat and store it for a long time, and presumably there were people who were traveling, who were traders, or they could send somebody out to the supermarket. You know, the whole community was staying in the desert, but there were people who they certainly sent out to get supplies. It's not. This is the least challenging question about, like, how did you get? It's not that much bread and not that much flour. You come back with some flour. Do like a biannual run to the wilderness, to the. It was a 3-day journey to get to anywhere they wanted to go. And I'll be able to tell you with greater detail when I return from Saudi Arabia, because I'll be able to tell you exactly how quickly you can get the flour.
Where's the nearest supermarket?
Yeah, he's right. Just get to they could have had a standing order.
Okay.
My question, I'm sorry.
Yeah. I'm sorry, you had a question, Rabbi Yossi?
Yeah, the other question is, how do you get 9 days? Well, I thought you baked it on Friday morning, and you had it ready for Shabbat. Well, how do you get 9 days?
They baked it on Friday, and then on Shabbat, they placed it on the table, and they took off the bread that was placed there the week before, and that's the bread they served to the Kohanim. So it was baked on Friday, Shabbat, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, the 9th day. It's basically, this bread is not what we call bread, it's what we call matzah. So therefore, you can imagine that our matzah, you know when they start picking our matzah?
Hanukkah.
Sukkot. I was at the matzah bakery on Monday night. I said, when did you guys open? And he said, we started right after Sukkot.
Wow. My question was about the kapot. Rashi says that there's 2, but in the Chanukhat Mizbeach, they received 12 from the 12 princes of Israel.
Oh, I don't know. We'd have to deal with that when we get to that.
Okay.
That was them. That wasn't for the lechem apanim? That was something else.
The kapot zahav 12, it doesn't say what they were for.
Okay, yeah. I don't know. That's what just a general donation, I guess. We have to, when we get to that, we'll remember that. Uksotav, and it had tubes. What are these tubes for? Hein kamin chatzai kanim. These are like hollow half reeds. Chalulim. Anistakin arkan, that are cracked along their length. So hollow split reeds cracked along their length. Dugmatan oseh shel zahav. He would make objects in their shape out of gold. Umisader shalosh al rosh kol lechem. And he would arrange 3 of them above the top of each bread. Sheyeshev alechem echad al gabe otan akanim. And that's what he would put the bread on each one. Mavdilim ben lechem ul lechem. You have to separate between the bread. So that the air can enter in between them, they don't become moldy. And in Arabic, they call this kasva. Kasva. Another thing for me to check with the people in Saudi Arabia, see if that's really a word. Okay. Umenaki osav, and its supports, what is that? Targumo. And its bearers. These are branches like golden pegs. They stand on the ground. And they rising considerably above the table. In line with the height of stack of bread. And they are 5 notches, one above the other. And the ends of the reeds that were between the breads would rest upon those notches, so that the burden of the upper breads should not weigh upon the lower ones. They can't break. Its bearer. So basically, they had this contraption to stop the bread from being crushed. Some say it's branches. Because they keep the bread firm and hold it that it doesn't break. And they read, this is a reed, that they keep it so it doesn't become moldy. But Unkulis, you know what this tells me is the rabbis themselves weren't sure what some of these things were. Difference of opinion. Asher Yusachba, and that they're covered with gold. Asher Yusaban, it's covered. Valksotav Lumer Asher Yusach. Shalav Kamin Sachach v'Chisoy, it was like a cover in a screen. That's what the word Yusach means, like the word Schach. Makomo Omer Vet Kisot HaNesach, the tubes of a covering. V'zeh Yusach v'Nesach Hashon Schach v'Kisoyim. It's an expression of Schach and Kisoy, covering. Okay. Okay. Oh, okay. I'm going to. Is there a lot more? Okay. You know what? If you could just leave it for 5 minutes, and then I'll help you bring everything in. All right. Thank you. So then it states. The next verse states. The v'nasata al shulchan lechem hapanim. And you shall place on the table the lechem panim, the bread of the panim, the bread of the surfaces, before me at all times. Why is it called lechem panim? Shayu panim k'moshe pirashi. Rashi says it's called the lechem panim, because it had multiple surfaces, like a face has multiple surfaces. And that's how he explained. Uminyana lechem v'seder markotav, and the number of breads and the order of its arrangement. For Rashim be'emor al konim, it's going to be explained in Parashat Emor, in Leviticus chapter 24. And now we go to the menorah, the asita menorah zahav tahor. You shall make a menorah out of pure gold. Miksha te'asem menorah. You shall beat it out. Yirecha v'kana kiviyah v'kaptarel fracha mimena yiyu. You shall beat out this menorah, its base, its branch, its goblets, its knobs, its flowers. Mimenu should all come from it. Let's see what this is. Rashi says it shall be beaten. Mikshata asa menorah, it shall all be beaten. What does that mean? Shelo yaseh chuliyot, they cannot turn into sections. You can't make it of separate pieces. And afterwards connected. The menorah comes from one block of gold. It became solder. You can't weld it together. It all comes from one piece of gold. You have to beat it with a hammer. And then you cut it with tools. Can you imagine this menorah coming from one piece of gold? It must be such an incredible work. Miksha, beaten out. Targumon negid, it was beaten. Lashon hamshacha, drawing out. Shemamshichat averin mina eshet l'kan, that they draw the parts of the menorah out of a solid block to either side. Bakashata kornis. I just want to say a big thank you to Mordechai and Aviva that they traveled all the way to Baltimore during a very busy traffic time to pick up food for our dinner here tomorrow night, which everybody is welcome to come to, because we're going to be able to hear from David Ben Moshe, who's going to be talking to us about his journey, about the Hebrew Israelites, and about Black Jewish dialogue. And he's going to solve the world's problems.
All of them, Friday.
Yeah, definitely. Sure.
Okay, but I'd like to stop here now so we could bring in the delivery, and we'll have a minute in 5 minutes. And a big shkoyach to everybody. Big shkoyach. If anybody's able to give me a hand, we'll bring this.